Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Game Developer Podcast. I'm your host, Senior Editor Bryant Francis. At the first ever GDC Festival of Gaming, we recorded a few podcast episodes right on the show floor in a comfortable podcast booth with, a view of the crowd. Our first guest in the booth was Owlchemy Lab CEO Andrew Eiche. I showed up for the interview, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to have a great chat, and then realized I forgot my laptop. That we needed to record the episode. Oops. Everyone makes mistakes. In this case, recovering from that mistake kicked off a fun conversation about careers, game designs, and a lot of topics we actually don't usually talk to Andrew about. We're usually talking about VR. So today's episode is a little shorter, but thankfully just as rewarding as every other show we do. Enjoy. Okay, and welcome to the Game Developer Podcast. Andrew, thank you for riffing with me as we scrambled to deal with the fact that I forgot my laptop.
I am always down for a improv comedy moment.
Yeah.
So it was fun. It was like a nice break from
You're just doing meetings all day. GDC is like, meetings. And you know what? Sometimes you just got to show up to a laptop booth and watch someone else scramble.
Yeah, and then be in a phone booth basically trying to entertain a bunch of people who are a captive audience.
Yeah, well, the captive audience, they're already your employees, so they're already a captive audience.
Yeah, by default. They're actually probably used to this, and they're zoning out and thinking about if they had their laptop open so they could do any other work.
Yeah. Let's do the riffing on the moment question, which is number one, has there ever been a moment in your game development career where you had the equivalent of showing up to a podcast that was very important to record and you did not have the laptop available?
When we did the Rick and Morty game, we were in a tent outside and we were like rated the number one free thing to do at San Diego Comic-Con, right?
Yeah.
But like a horrible storm came and I had to, and this was in the days of like we had lighthouses.
Yeah.
So like they were just set up and I had to hold the tent, like physically hold it down because if it moved an inch or two more, it was going to knock the lighthouse. And there was just somebody in VR hanging out. No idea that like they were seconds from absolute disaster.
Did you when you got into game development, did you ever think anything like that could happen in your career?
I think I have that thought every day is like, I just want to make games. But now I'm doing this.
Now you're a chief executive owl.
Now I'm a chief executive owl. Yeah. Now I'm arguing with a payment processor.
That won't go named.
Unnamed payment processor. Yes. So that's okay, fine. I'll do whatever.
What were you arguing with them about? You have to know.
They struggled to pay taxes during COVID.
Okay,
and there was a warrant out in 3 states for my arrest because we didn't pay taxes. And I remember saying to them, like, "Can you please pay our taxes?" And they're like, "Alternatively, you could just not go to Kentucky." And I was like, "But I want to go to Kentucky in my life. Like, I don't want to be a fugitive."
First podcast of GDC, and we were hearing about how Chief Executive Owl Andrew Eiche had a warrant out in his head in 3 states for a short period of time.
Three states. I only found out it was 3. I told the story about 1, and then our account was like, "No, it was 3."
It was 3.
It was 3.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was lucky it was a pandemic because I wasn't traveling. But would have been one of those stories where it's like, calling in from jail, like, "Hey, I'm actually, I didn't realize
the call in from
that
jail
I was a fugitive in Kentucky, and here I am."
Yeah, Andrew. For one, you and I have had a lot of chance to talk about VR. Maybe we'll talk about some VR today. But I guess I was at the developers conference last night here at GDC. For the listeners at home, just please know I'm doing everything possible to not make this the GDC shill show. Just because we are the same entity. I'm genuinely just like, I'm here and having a good time. But last night, Austin Wintory, Troy Baker, those folks were talking about a lot of firsts in game development. What were the first games you were making, and like what were kind of the first things you were making that made you want to make more games, I guess?
Oh, wow.
Way back before VR.
But yeah, long before VR, long before anything. So yeah, I had always kind of tinkered with engines. I think the first thing I ever truly made was maps in the original Unreal Engine.
Mm-hmm.
I made a bunch of those. They were terrible. I used like the lightning sprite that was animated for the walls and floor.
Yeah.
It was not something that was human playable.
Yeah.
But I thought it was super fun.
Yeah.
And then like, I kind of stuck with it, but making like little things here and there. And then when I got out of when I was in college, I like did a project in a Half-Life map, and that's when my parents were like, "What are you doing with this like computer engineering thing? You should be doing games." And
the rare supportive parents.
Yeah, they were very supportive. And yeah, at the time, the first real games that I like truly made that were somewhat playable were in XNA when it had first launched.
Yeah.
Right. And so
the XNA framework gave us Bastion from Supergiant Games. Yeah.
And people use a version of it today on tons of games.
Yeah.
Right. It's FNA now or something like that. But it's basically, that's the lineage there. But it was like, at the time, I was like, I knew C# and I was like, I could get this to run on an Xbox 360. That's so cool. And so, yeah, I made a bunch of like very, very artistic games. Cause at the time I was like, that's my calling, to make games that no one will buy nor understand. But about painting and about drawing and things like that. So.
Yeah. It's the challenge. Like, as someone who's in the part-time in the development world too, is when your path in is both, when you're learning the tools and you're sort of learning about the creative craft, then you're sort of trying to figure out, okay, what is it that I have to say? And in traditional art schools, you tend to get like the shit morally beaten out of you a little bit, or not. But art schools for a lot of folks are a long path of a lot of professors like beating up everything you have to say to try and improve your ability to say it. And we've had, these conversations about like meaningful games that can have an impact, and that's absolutely all true. And a lot of people who make those games themselves will be the first to admit they're like, yeah, I don't know how I figured this out. I don't know how I did it. But then, you can get easily led down the path to, when I am making a game, I must be expressing something, I must be making something. But like, truly, this was a friend of mine recently said in a Q&A back in Boston, like, on the writing side, games writing is one part educational, right? Like, even really good narrative scenes that like aren't tutorials or whatever are in some way supposed to be helping the player know what that, because in this big sea of digital information that they're getting, story is just one of those tools we have. So it's I think a lot of people can relate to like wanting to get into this, for the arts, for the whatever, and then sort of realizing like, wait, no, when I go down that path, no one wants to play what I'm making. Like that's always like really hard to admit.
Right. And I think there's like a few creators that were, it was at the time where we had these creators making these really auteur, very, very small games.
Yeah.
It's XNA, it's the inception of like what would soon become indie gaming.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was just like, I can say something deep and meaningful without it having character. And it was like, no, I think the learning part is you have to learn that like tropes aren't good or bad. They're tools. Yeah. They exist and you can use them. And yeah, on the writing side, I totally agree with you. We have like with every line, we have like a hierarchy of like what makes a good line.
Yeah.
There's like 6 bullet points on what makes a good line in our game.
Yeah.
And it's like, does it get the number one is, hey, it has to get the point across it's trying to get across, right? And then we have all these things, and then we have one rule that breaks it all, which is, but the rule of funny wins.
Yeah.
Right. If it's funny, you can break all the rules.
Yeah. That's the God, like that's and I it's a very mediocre thing in an interview to just say, oh my God, and that's so true. But like I actually think like one of the reasons that and I have this conversation when I'm explaining non-creative things to people about games is like the games, any game is, on some level like this interlocking things of rules that like the players are observing with, the language, the programming language beneath it is rules that are observing with it. And then everyone's like, okay, cool. So you just follow those rules and it works and it's like, oh, that's the neat part. It doesn't. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like you have to, every rule, like sometimes what happens is when those rules are broken, flexed or whatever is like, that's the weird spongy space that we are still trying to, the second someone can put it down on paper, we're done. Good news. I don't think anyone's putting it down on paper anytime soon.
Well, and I think the thing that we learn constantly is that human systems are important.
Yeah.
Right. And I worked in board games for a little while, and when you work in video games, you get really obsessed with the rules, right? And you're like, the game arbitrated this, so anything that the game doesn't stop you from doing, that's it. That's the ground truth. And when you work in board games, they go, house rules are just as valid as anything else.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and it's like you can add your own stuff, and they're like, I don't care. Like if you're having a good time,
Yeah,
like,
you already spent the money.
yeah, exactly. But even too, like philosophically, like the house rules are okay.
Yeah.
And so like accepting some of that, and you kind of see that in how our games have evolved and where we come from. But if we get too obsessed with competitive kind of flattens what is a very interesting and artistic medium. One of the things I love about, like, take Expedition 33, which is a game I played obsessively.
Claire Obscure Expedition 33. I'm only going to say because we have to say full game names the first time we mention them on podcast. Anyway, Expedition 33.
Expedition 33. The thing I love about it is that it engages you in multiple different ways and allows you to play, and then it doesn't stop you from breaking the game. And like it doesn't even try to stop you. It's like, you want to break this game? You know what you're doing, and you're going to break it. And then it was like, yeah, I beat Simon in 7 seconds.
Yeah.
And it was like, if that's how you want to play this game, good on you.
Yeah. And I mean, like, they did it in a way, right? Like, and it's always great when a dev does this, is they sort of, if every game is like sort of 5 seconds away from smashing to bits in a different way, like if you sort of give the player a little playground, like in their case, it's, the upgrade system that they have that you level up the upgrades, you level up how your characters use the upgrades. And then after there's that one threshold point where they're like, all right, go nuts, 9999999 damage after everything. Like your goal is to sort of try and experiment and get that firing as fast as possible. You've both like created like my spouse Carly was saying, I've never messed with these kind of builds before, but now I am, because like I feel like it's a puzzle for me to solve. And then the min-max player finds those moments, finds the 7 second Simon defeat, but now it's this playground, this like very ethereal playground to play in, because all you're doing is navigating menus, which by the way on console was not always fun. So credit to them for like even making me willing
especially
to
with hundreds of like different items that you were messing around with.
Yeah. And then like, you're obviously in the rest of the game, you still have your players who are like, edging up against the game world or whatever to try and find the clipping spots. But like now you've concentrated where the player thinks they can break the game. You've created the artificial breaking zone for them.
And so, and kind of running along that line, right? If anybody listening to this podcast is making a roguelike, I think the most important thing about any roguelike, you need to have a way for the whole thing to break.
Oh, okay.
Like it's really important in a good way, where it's like all the luck hits you. And so I'll give you 2 examples of games. So full name Hades, right? In Hades, right? You have Daedalus, who gives you like weapons upgrades. And there are combinations of weapons upgrades that are absolutely like, I can no longer take any meaningful damage.
Yeah.
And I heal super fast. And like that's game breaking, right?
Yeah.
But they're like, it's a run and you had the luck.
Yeah.
And Balatro, as another one, is one where they're like, yeah, you can build a combination that literally like gets to not a number.
Yeah.
Right. The game will just say like you've overflowed all the numbers.
Yeah.
And I think an important point of roguelikes is that like, yes, there's you need to make sure it's strategic and you can kind of like build and like come up with plays, but you also need that time where you're like, the dice have spoken and this is your anointed run and you shall break the world.
Yeah. Yes, and speaking on the top, I think actually the actual response that I would say to all that is hell yeah, because that's super fun. I think like since we've drifted into roguelikes in this very abstract wandery design podcast interview we're doing,
I love it.
I decided it was a design podcast interview exactly 3 seconds ago. No, what's fine. We'll wander where we wander, but how do you sort of feel, we're talking about designing roguelikes right now, and we're giving tips for people outside the booth and at home. Hey, here's a little tip from when you're making your roguelike. But right now, everyone making a roguelike is doing so, like 5 or so years after, Hades exits 1.0. The boom is definitely still going right now, right? But like, how, as a game designer, do you decide? I mean, this is a question I've heard a few say, like, how do you decide what game to make? When not only creatively but financially, like the space is so filled right now, how do you think someone can decide that like whatever roguelike they've got in their head is actually worth chasing down? Like, how do you think you guys at Owlchemy like kind of do that when you're figuring out VR things, like what's worth chasing, even if it's fun?
If you're not, so in the caveated rare case that you are a large studio working on one of these lifestyle games, as long as you are not them, which the majority of us aren't,
no,
it's go deep.
Yeah.
The audience of games, you are no longer trying to just convince broad groups to play your game. What you are trying to convince is a group of people. You're trying to look them deep in the eye and say, I understand your genre of game so well that you are going to play this and feel that I know it and you can really enjoy it, right? One of former Owl alumni, Chris Wade, made this game Big Hops, right? And Big Hops is a platformer where it's like, I know platformers. The controls feel good. We let you experiment. We do this, and we do some really crazy depth stuff, right? Team Cherry's games, right? Silksong. We understand Metroidvania. And we respect the genre and we have our own take on it. And if you are deeply into that, we have it. Blueprints, right? You like games where you take notes? Let me show you a notes game.
I am going to show you the deepest notes. I'm going to spend 8 years making all the notes you will ever need to take.
But the point, the broader point there is that to think that you're gonna I see too many studios where they're terrified they're going to alienate this generic gamer, this generic human, and it's like that's actually less of a risk than you alienate the people who should be buying your game. And so the deal with the roguelikes thing is that you should make a roguelike if you really understand roguelikes and you have a specific thing you want to do that adds on to what the genre is, and you're willing to look at roguelike fans and not be like, I can make it better, but be like, I understand you. I'm a fan too. And we're going to go real deep with this thing.
The thing that makes me think about is good Lord. Oh no. Now I remember where I was at. A couple dices back, you and I were having a chat about many things, including the black hole of a topic that is generative AI. And I'm going to successfully keep us at the edge of the black hole for now. But what you said something that stuck with me since, which is generative AI can't wink at the player. And let's not like, I don't want to dwell too much on whether it can or can't here for a second, but like how would you I think I know what I know what I think of when I think of winking at the player. You guys make games where you're winking at the players all the time. You have a winking game.
That's fair.
But even then beyond that, like how do you think designers everywhere effectively quote wink at the player, I guess?
In Hades, it's the little Gorgon that exists as just like a fun writing thing. That where you talk to it, she's like, oh my God, like you're like freaking out. It's the design of the levels. Like you can pick any game, but it's the human nature of it. It's that like we as humans are built to pattern match in a way that like very few other creatures are. And we will just inherently turn something that doesn't need pattern into a pattern. And an AI can't do that because it doesn't have neurons that are looking for food in the environment and looking for predators. Right. It's built as a predictive linear algorithm. So it has just a different thing. So the wink at the player a lot of times is just like, the easy way to ask it is like, why did you do that? And it's like, because I liked it. Because I wanted to. Because it exists. It exists without reason to exist. I think the character Minoko in Claire Obscure Expedition 33 is like a whole character is just a wink at the player. Right? It's
like in this big absurd, or no, excuse me, this big epic in a capital E, like high drama soap opera, like family drama, like end of the world, like a character considers taking their life in like the first 2 hours, and here is this little guy who just trots up and goes like, I'm going to kill you, and like with that energy, right? Not a direct quote, but like just the mere like contrast of it, and like making a player look down and go, this does not fit my pattern of expectation of the game. When we were talking about that, I think I was playing Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown recently, and I thought about how like sometimes a level designer might quote wink at the player by like the thing that popped in my head right away was like the goof of like, okay, we're gonna set up like a puzzle that feels satisfying to solve, or a like particular like in a jumping puzzle or something, and we're going to invite you to like solve the puzzle of accomplishing it, and then right at the moment where you think you're safe, like drop the trapdoor on you in some way, and that trapdoor can either be the thing that acts as progression, you fake out the player thinking they failed, or you like, I've seen some clips of Silksong, and I've seen people going, mother motherfucker, this game, like Silksong, they're winking at the player by going like, hey, yeah, you solved all those little Metroid problems and you got to the end of it. Now here's one more you have to get ready for. And they like I suspect those moments are like high death spike moments, right? But even then, you want that death spike because you want to get that little smack in the face a little bit.
And a lot of times the level designers too, it's just like even a wink that's like a very obvious one. The unobvious ones are like little bits of symmetry, little bits where you're like, it didn't have to be that way, but the level wrapped into itself.
Yeah.
Right. Like you see a lot of the great level designers, and it's like the level starts as like a big kind of like sprawling snake, and then they slowly just begin wrapping it in on itself and showing vistas and those kind of, there's the John Romero like school of like level design is like you show the player where they're going and where they'll be, right? But like that concept is very easy to explain, but very difficult to master, right? And that's all like winks. That's all foreshadowing, and a lot of it is like the same thing with literary device, right? I think a lot about myth and storytelling, and the that's like the original human art form, right? Is like storytelling, and so I think that's where we find the gap, right? Yeah. When I regenerated content, it doesn't have that feeling in it, the feeling of the human nature of storytelling, right? Yeah. And that's a wink at the player a lot of times.
Yeah, I think a challenge when you're trying to, I mean, we talked a few seconds ago about how like, because we're talking about like that fuzzy goopy thing. Here we're talking about how AI can or can't do it, which I think like when you're in a group conversation, you can find yourself in the trap of someone else rolling up and going like, well, we can do it because we did this weird thing. And you're sort of like, no, you missed the point, but like you missed the point, buddy, a little bit, right? Like, right. We're not even necessarily in a like venting our frustrations about AI moment. It's just sort of like this very goopy thing like keeps manifesting in ways in games that we can like build a language for. We talk about winks, we talk about POIs, we talk about these things, but the challenging thing for probably a lot of you at home is even when you're talking to people on your team about who you share creative energy with, ideals with, value with, is sometimes like until you like sit down and like try to crank it out in the engine and it just doesn't even quite work, is like it can be so hard to talk about this medium.
So we have a designer at Owlchemy, and we do this like internal conference, and he gave a talk on the design of the garage, our garage in dimensional double shift. Double shift. And he showed a desk in dimensional double shift, and I had just like, his desk, right? It looks like a shop. And he told us this like truly like heartwarming story about how as a kid he would spend hours at the garage his dad worked at, and this desk was that desk that he played under. And it's like, that is the human, that's the storytelling, that's the mushy part, is he brought so much of himself, and I had no idea, like I was allegedly the game director, and I had no idea how much, Kelly is his name, and I had no idea how much he had like truly poured into this. It was like very touching to hear. And I think that texture, when other players play it, they feel that. It doesn't feel like we went out and like, inspo board looked up desk.
Or just went on the, and no shame to the people who use cheap assets or asset store packs or whatever, you get its desk off there. You choose to make a desk. Someone chooses to make a desk because they go, no, I got a desk that I think belongs here.
And when you think about it, right, like that's an object that in a video game, right, is like, it shouldn't have, it's the set dressing, right? Yeah. But it was so meaningful, and it just shows like, this is again like that back to the wink at the player thing, right? Is like that desk only exists because of the human moment that somebody grew up. Like the AI did not have a childhood.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It did not have formative years. It did not have a, what do you call those? Like the core memories, right? And so there's nothing for it to bring.
Yeah. Weirdly, we are also describing the plot of a recent episode of Star Trek Starfleet Academy, which for you, the folks outside and anyone at home, I actually encourage you to go watch for many reasons, one of which being, holy crow, it's a good show, and not many Star Trek seasons actually have a pretty good first season off the bat. And you might have heard on the internet that it's not a good show, but here on the Game Developer Podcast,
that's our official position, is it's a good show.
It's a pretty good show. Sometimes a fun, goofy show where occasionally they swing for the fences emotionally is like in this case with Robert Picardo's character of the Doctor, who ironically, if we're going to bring it all back down to video game Earth, is a featured character in Star Trek Voyager Across the Expanse or something. I forget the name of the actual game name, but we have a Star Trek Voyager game right now, right? Like where players are taking the human moments from the show. Some of them they have debated about for years. The Tuvix of it all, or for those who aren't familiar, Star Trek Voyager, very silly show. In one episode, two of the actors their characters are fused together into one character, and the episode tries to make you think it's a big moral dilemma about whether to split this person back in half and make it two. But it's so absurd. It's absurd in its cruelty. It's absurd in its like how the characters come about it. That like practically offering the players the choice, and it's like you could have greenlit this game just on what would you do if you were in Janeway's seat for Tuvix. It's just one of those silly, like even a licensed thing can. I mean, licensed things often bring so much good stuff.
And I think that's it. Yeah, I mean, you've done
licensed games.
So yes, we have, and you hit on one of the joys of Star Trek for me, which is like, it's actually never a technical problem. It always is like a social emotional problem. Every problem boils down to like the crew isn't communicating well, and we need to like go into and like the prototypical TNG episode is. Wait a minute, everybody. Why are we at our desks? Get into the conference room. We'll figure it out there. And that's like TNG on repeat. Yeah.
This is like, I think this wanders into another interesting area of design and picking how your game flows, how it is when you're looking. Something I've observed when people like either riff on Star Trek, react to Star Trek, the occasional like if you happen to find like old Star Trek fan films or whatever, and you watch people's like amazing, adorable attempts to recreate it, sometimes there is a struggle to connect with the vulnerability of someone in this cast of characters you like is making a really big mistake, and that mistake can only be solved by confronting it emotionally. And then somewhere in there, that's like kind of I'm repeating what you say a little bit in the like when you're then mimicking that when you have like a Federation type element in your game, when you have a like we also have a Klingon race in our we have a warrior cast in our game, like we're sort of relying on these familiar sci-fi tropes, and that's when the generic doesn't. That's when the generic can, and I think the like fear, the instinct of we need to make something that players have like a pre-understanding of, right? Like Federations, warrior species. But when you sort of like get, I don't even think you need to be a deeply like. I don't think you need to. Excuse me. I'm trying to find the words without. I feel like we sometimes say if you want to make something special, you need to go so much further than that. And then if you're not able to do that, we'll just stick to like mechanics heavy games. But I even think like if your game is like not story heavy, if you're relying on these visual like reference points for players to try and get them in, like go a little further, go to try and find that little human thing that like, and then weirdly we're back to the wink. So the player notices.
So I actually have a good example. So Dimensional Double Shift, our game. Exists in the liminal spaces of America. Because it's more interesting, right? So we could have done New York City, but we did New Jersey, right? We could have done our next dimension will be a really fun one. I can't say it. Get the evil eye through the booth, but we could have done a very specific spot in this area, and we chose something else. And with Texas and Hexas, we choose kind of this space, but it's also relatable because that kind of like road trip liminal space. I went to Vietnam and we stopped at a gas station, and it could have been plucked. Other than the food in there, and it could have been plucked out of like West Virginia, and no one would have known. Right. And so it's one of those things where it's like where you're saying, I think we get really obsessed with like the Beyblade. Have you heard the Beyblade thing where like
I haven't heard the Beyblade thing,
Beyblade is like if you start with like fighting each other and then you end by saving the world and then the universe because it's always escalating. Right. It's like in this we worry about escalation, but like a lot of people don't really care about that. They care about human stories. There's a writer at Owlchemy who has left Hannah Brady. She like changed my outlook on the way that we think of story, because she said there's like, you kind of pick one of three elements to focus on. It has all of that, but like, are you writing like a story about the plot? Are you writing a story about the characters? Are you writing a story about the setting? And I think Beyblade is a story about the setting, and so you amp, right? But people love stories about the characters.
Yeah.
You could have the lowest stakes.
Yeah.
But if it's interpersonal, and I think that's the same thing with games. I think we forget that is like in our case, like the stakes are borderline zero, and you're running a gas station. But it's a deeply human thing to be like, oh, I've been to this place. This place exists, and it's a place that we don't really poke at or explore. We just accept it for what it is.
Yeah, we never think about the back room of gas station. We just think about the back rooms of the meme YouTube video stuff. But also then the back rooms of the gas station are the like, oh, I don't know what that is in my head. That could be like a demon hell. Yeah,
right. Or more people, or the one thing is like you want to think of the green room at like a night, at like a talk show, right?
Yeah. We got one of those out there, right?
Yeah,
right?
More exactly. This big
don't.
production. More people will experience the back room of a convenience store.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's just, and that's Job Simulator was the same way. It's like we made the astronaut job and we made all these ones. And the thing that really stuck was these really mundane but really common jobs.
Yeah.
And it just clicks with you.
I forget. I swear I forget what it was in a game I was playing recently. But sometimes when I'm playing a game and I'm like, and if maybe the feel of playing it, if the flow of like the core, like whatever combat thing is at the center of it is getting me, like I'm sticking around with it, but I often catch myself going like, man, like they've invested a lot of money or time in words that are in the game that are telling a story. And sometimes I just go like, it would be as simple as if the first things I encountered in the game were the antagonizing force that you're up against, this like big evil bad. I need like more of that character like just talking shit to me. I need I'm now remember it's all like I don't want to name the game in question, but like I'm actually thinking about if you need a non-game reference, Alan Cumming, when he's hosting the Traders. Have you seen the Traders on NBC?
I haven't.
Weirdly, I think it's actually pretty good. I think game designers should watch it.
I love that this has become this show is pretty good.
Yeah,
you should watch this.
This show is pretty good. Hey, do games have like a comparison issue between movies and TV? Like no, but like I think when you're going to these memes, don't like try and remake them, but like try and capture that je ne sais quoi. Anyway. Alan Cumming is like the most antagonistic host here, but he's doing it in such over the top flair. And I came up recently because on something I was working on, I was like, wow, I'm writing this and I'm like being really mean to the player. Like, where did I come? And I was like, oh, I was watching the Traders. But in his meanness, he's being instructional. When a antagonist in a game comes down and like mocks you, meets the shit out of you, sometimes he's telling you like what to do.
Well, and it's motivating. So we had an old build of the game that we put in front of playtest with Xavier Nelson. Right? And he was like,
game for the folks at home or don't outside, Xavier Nelson, Strange Scaffold, excellent game designer, makes the oddest of oddball games that you can find.
He's like, we need a unifying force to hate.
Yeah.
That's what he said in our like very light game. And that's Alice, the character who's like this AI sprite that exists that speaks in like loops and riddles and like kind of belittles you and says like you're just paperwork if you die and things like that.
Yeah.
And then we added a second character where I pretend to be like an awful CEO. And so, but it was like to your point, right? It's like sometimes they're instructing you and sometimes they don't even have to be overtly instructing you as much as they're motivating you. You see that as like we wanted everyone to bond like, oh, this is just a bad boss. And like we can all bond over hating our boss.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a game that nailed this, but its legacy has been a little confusing in terms of what it does for on the game writing side is Borderlands 2 with Handsome Jack. I think what they nailed, I mean, one, like having Handsome Jack show up early and like kick you around and like kick your sandcastle over, is like the starting point. And then he's regularly sort of calming in with you. And I think where a lot of teams pulled from that was there's got to be a wacky villain who like monologues about like reality. Well, a little bit Far Cry 3 here too is what we're talking. And I think that's led some like you don't want your player going, oh, we have Handsome Jack at home about your thing, but like just that consistent check-in sometimes is really helpful.
Well, so the perfect example of this is Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah.
Right? Because Dr. Robotnik pops up constantly to remind you like, hey, this is why you're doing this.
Yeah.
Here's my weird machine and I will survive this encounter.
Yeah.
But like I'm here to laugh at you and antagonize you and push you towards this goal.
Yeah, it's so funny that when we are these little and if we're talking about like all the people who help make a game wonderful, which has been something I've heard a lot of my colleagues on the GDC team were talking about with trying to in terms of how we're trying to make this event, make sure that we're celebrating like that Sonic the Hedgehog. Like there's no narrative design on Sonic the Hedgehog. There's an animator down there, the animators who made that little shoe tapping thing for Sonic, who did that, right? Like when you're on your team, and I guess in your case when you're leading your teams, like trying to make sure people are making those without having to be told to, like probably must be like a thing you're trying to accomplish when you're saying go be creative.
So yeah, we have a polish thing, and a lot of like one of my jobs has been to write up kind of a vision statement, and someday we'll have to like figure out how to like publish one of these, but I write this vision statement that is it's a piece of narrative that no one sees except for our team, and it like sets the tone for the dimension. So like in Hexus it was like, this isn't heck, this is hell, right? Like because it's trying to lay out the boundaries for people as a grounding factor because to get them. And so it has this whole thing, and then when we look back we're like, wow, it started to get very weighty because we were like, you could draw direct lines. And so a lot of it is in that when you're talking about like the toe tap and stuff, it's like partially, top down, us pushing and being like, wow, this would be great, or you should add this piece of juice or this flair or this whatever to make this better. And then partially it's like on the autonomous developer to be like, this is what I thought fit here. Like back to our desk, right? Like I want this because this is what makes sense. And so my goal, right, where I sit is to inspire, to guide, and then to make sure that I create the environment where people feel comfortable doing some weird stuff, getting kind of exploring and pushing those boundaries. And that's a lot of times where the great stuff comes in. I think great game designers are filters, not builders as much. And they can understand when a great idea comes along, but it's not that they're like sitting on top of Design Mountain.
Yeah. For a thought about sitting on top of Design Mountain, I've had a lot of students when we're talking about like careers in games, and we've sailed past the point of like, hey guys, the job situation's really hard right now. Like let's everyone's got to have that conversation. If you're not talking to a student about it in some form, I think you're please like try to do that and be helpful and all, while not being discouraging. Anyway, sliding past that, I've had a lot of folks sort of like occasionally say, and this always like makes me a little sad every time, is they're like, oh yeah, like I have a design document portfolio, like that's totally gonna help me, like even with just an internship, right? And I'm like, and I'm like, please just go sit down, even just like a spreadsheet, even if it's just a spreadsheet, like showing in writing case lines, but even then I want
or
more.
Even just like paper prototyping, right?
Yeah.
Like
design spreadsheet. I feel like design documents.
You'll appreciate this. So with writers, I have an exercise I do. Right?
Okay.
So like I want to be a games writer, and I'm always like, all right, I want you to write, I need a hamburger 20 times, each time different, each time interesting.
Yeah.
If you can do that and only go a little insane, because it's kind of because I did a lot of the writing. And it's like you go a little insane, but if you could do that and you're not like, this is the worst thing I've ever done, then it's like, welcome to games writing, right? Because it's kind of the same thing with the design where you're like, I'm going to do this big overarching thing, and it's like, no, what you're going to be doing most of the time is like our we have Prism's one of our technical designers, and they go in and it's like, I need you to write a description for every object in this game. Begin. And like that's the job. In one of the cases I had urged this student to like, hey, like I think you know more Unreal Engine than I do. Just show that you can, if you can think of like, if you're like the cool game in question, I think we were talking about League of Legends. If you can just animate or show like design that ability and then show it just being done, that will go so much further than a whole MOBA game battle design doc. Please, I was begging her to I was begging them to like, please go down that path. Yeah, I mean, like we don't, we do this like brief system, so we have like a little bit of documentation, but a lot of times we're documenting, in retrospect on what happened. It's very funny because there's some of the audience are the people who actually like end up paying the iron price for my stupid suggestions.
But
but that's it's the other thing too is it's a collaborative process.
Yeah.
And I think it's not like no one at Owlchemy, no one at all exists within the like, I just make something and it happens. And then we all have like so many more constraints. There's so many things that happened, not because we wanted them to or did it. It was like, what fits in the 4 days we have left to do this?
Yeah.
And that's it. And then it's like, or we'll get to a point where we'll just be like, all right, leads and above, you're not allowed to make real changes. This is a yes, no vote. Yes, no. Do you like it or not?
God, I love a yes, no vote. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
are we doing this? Yes or no? Stop
Yeah.
it. No more arguing.
Do you have a problem that requires us shutting down production? If it's anything short of that, we're ride or die on this. Yeah, this is it.
You don't get no more polish time, no more punch up.
Well, it's even on the other side is like our developers actually don't. They've done the polish, and it's like actually getting the leadership to be like, no more comments.
Yeah.
No more comments. You're done with comments because every time you make one, it's 3 more days of work.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of no more comments, Andrew, thank you for joining us today. This is the for my edition of the Game Developer Podcast. This is the first time we've done it here at GDC. We have a really cool booth. We have a great audience outside. Thank you guys. It's been nice sort of like watching you nod along out there. I have really enjoyed that, really getting this, listening to folks at the show this year when the industry's going through like such a challenging time. Like it's still there can be so much noise that sort of feels like we gotta like get rich quick stuff, and I don't hear that from so many people. I hear people want to talk about, like I said, collaboration, and not just in a like cheesy way, but in a like, hey, sometimes collaboration is stop working. So
Yes.
for us, that's it for us here from the GDC show floor. We are going to stop working now. See you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Andrew for coming by the Game Developer Podcast and for being our impromptu AV guy while we were setting up the booth. For more from us at Game Developer, be sure to visit www.gamedeveloper.com, follow us on major social platforms, and subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find me on Blue Sky at bryantfrancis.me. Today's episode was edited by Pierre Landreau, and our theme music is by Mike Meehan. And a reminder/disclaimer, Game Developer and GDC are sibling organizations under Informa Festivals. Thanks for listening. And hey, if you ever have your own laptop moment, just remember, it's all right. It's just another problem for you to solve, and you get to look good while solving it.